this a metal thing?
Yes. Little taste.
David, what is this?
It's pretty thick.
Great.
I have to kill a lot of people. Just tell me what you want me to fuck.
I have big tits and a tiny vagina.
Oil me up, Daddy.
I can't believe that Bryce prefers big tits. Mistletoe alert. This is backcountry.
This guy was a real jerk.
How long can Hugo be pregnant?
Chomp, 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 chomp.
Oh, she's such a dick, David.
Okay, everybody, put on your corpse handling gloves.
Hoodie Picasso.
Horror.
Hello and welcome to Horror Movie Talk Plus. That's right, folks. We've now transcended genre boundaries and sometimes cover other movies. We're a place for horror movie lovers, but the plus tells you we also welcome genre curious and genre allies. So make sure you rate and review and subscribe on iTunes. Full video available on YouTube. Don't be a square. Be sure to share. Be sure to share. Also, check out patreon.com/horror movie talk, the equivalent of the adult section at your video rental store. If you want to add your voice to the community, go to horrormovietalk.com or call 682-253-4468 and leave us a voicemail. As always, we have Fart Simpson crammed into the production booth. I'm Bryce Hanson, and Island Boy David Day is unfortunately sick today with raccoon pox. So today we have a special guest, Jordyn Wilson. Say hi, Jordyn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jordyn. Do I say anything about myself, Bryce?
You could. Jordyn is a coworker, now former coworker.
R.I.P.
At my place of business, and she's always been a champion of the podcast within ability. Not that anyone cares, but she's a horror movie lover too, and we chat on Slack frequently about horror movies and horror movie recommendations, and she's listened to the show, so I'm glad to have her on.
What Bryce isn't saying is that I forced him to be my friend and give me movie recommendations in every single one of our one-on-ones.
It's true. Yeah, she's I'm dead inside when I'm at work, and she is one of those that brought me out of my shell and asked for me to be a friend, and I oblige happily. Yeah, so I'm bummed out to see that Jordyn just is moving on to another company, so I jumped at the opportunity to get her on the podcast so I could at least talk to her one last time.
I'm coming back. This is just the first podcast, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking for guests, and this is your audition, so don't fuck it up.
Okay.
What's your horror background, Jordyn? What's your favorite horror movies? What got you into the genre? How early did your parents traumatize you?
I have been a horror fan for as long as I can remember. Actually, I was 2 years old and my parents came into the living room and I was 6 inches away from the TV screen watching Jaws with a blanket wrapped around me, and they were worried about the trauma. But after that, I was hooked. The adrenaline, the storytelling. My granny actually was who kind of helped me blossom this love of horror. I remember vividly watching Leprechaun with her when I was a small child. And Leprechaun, very, very corny, but also very terrifying for a young child to watch. But ever since I was a little kid, my parents didn't really give me boundaries on movies to watch. They let me watch whatever I wanted to. I did tell my dental hygienist that I saw Blade when I was, 8 or 9, and she approached my mom and was like, I just want you to know that she said she watched Blade. And my mom was like, oh my gosh. But my mom knew. But lifelong
oh my
fan.
Gosh. Those terrible influences. I got to see who she's hanging out with now.
I know. And my parents aren't really horror fans. My dad would watch some with me. But mostly my granny Linda. She loved them, and now she doesn't watch them, which is like really sad for me because I vividly remember watching so many horror films with her every Halloween. Instead of going trick-or-treating, she'd make me chili and I'd hand out candy and we'd watch scary movies together. And I would say my favorite of all time is John Carpenter's Halloween. Big fan of Michael Myers, the original Boogeyman, which is a nice segue here.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, just really love most scary movies. I mean, even the bad ones, there's something I can find that I appreciate about them. More recent ones, I like The Witch, or Witch, and you know, those newer kind of indie. Babadook was another really good one, which kind of reminded me of Boogeyman as well.
That's awesome. So, are you a fan of all the Halloween movies or just the original?
The original, the second one in the hospital is also a banger. Again, I can find something that I like about all of them. I think the newer ones, gosh, I don't even know what they're called. Halloween. You have to help me out, Bryce. What was the most recent one?
Yeah, whatever. The 2020s ones.
They're okay. Like, I like to see Jamie Lee Curtis, and it's more nostalgic than anything, but nothing really beats the original two. Actually, I think the second one I like better than the first one. Something about the hospital, and I feel like the gore's a little better in the second one. But yeah, Halloween 3 threw me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we've learned since the beginning of the podcast that Halloween fans are a different breed, and they are staunchly defensive of anyone that criticizes the Halloween series or Michael Myers. We found that out very quickly. So I'm surprised that you're not insane, because that's been our experience for any big Halloween fans.
Honestly, I'm a person that loves nostalgia, and that was one of the first ones I watched with my granny Linda.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it, like why I have such fond memories of Michael Myers. Just watching it with Granny and, you know, being scared out of my mind.
So top 5 horror movies. Number 1, Halloween.
Number 1's probably Halloween 2. Number 2, Halloween, the original. The Witch is number 3. Big fan. I really like Hereditary a lot. And as well as... Damn, I should have prepared for this. Midsommar. I have to say Midsommar. You know, I went back and forth, but I like the folk horror a lot. It's more real, and that's just a cult movie, and the cult movies as well are really appealing to me. I think because like I think I would be an easy target for a cult. You know, having a commune. So it's good to like educate myself and be able to recognize those signs.
That's, you know, the fact that you recognize that you're an easy target for a cult means you're not an easy target for a cult.
That's what I keep telling everyone. But you got to be aware. You got to be ready. Yeah.
Whenever people love you a lot and shower you with praise and make you feel like you belong, like, run the other way. You don't belong. You're not good. You just remind yourself that. I do every day. Okay, well, thanks for coming on, Jordyn. We got a great show today. We're going to be reviewing The Boogeyman, the new release that's a Stephen King adaptation of a short story. We'll start out by giving a brief review on our score for the movie. We score on a scale of 1 to 10. After we give the score, we'll get into spoilers and take a deeper dive into what we liked and hated about the film. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's in theaters. You can listen up to the point where we give the score and bounce until after you see it and come back for the spoiler section. So The Boogeyman is in theaters now and will probably make its way to Hulu in a couple of months. Found out that it was originally planned on being a straight-to-streaming movie, and then audience reactions were good, so they put it on a theatrical release. So what it's about is while psychiatrist Will Harper, played by Chris Messina, and his two daughters, Sadie and Sawyer, are getting over the death of their mother, or wife and mother, he is visited by Lester Billings, a disturbed patient that insists on talking about the death of his 3 children to an unseen presence. Before Will can help him, Lester commits suicide in one of Will's closets. Sawyer then begins to be tormented by a presence lurking in the shadows in the closets and crevices of their home. At first, Sadie doesn't believe Sawyer, but eventually experiences things herself. As Sadie investigates the background of Lester Billings, she finds out that the monster is none other than the Boogeyman. Wacky hijinks ensue. This is an adaptation of a Stephen King short story of the same name, which amounts to a little more than a campfire story set in a psychiatrist's office. There really isn't much to work with, and the movie ends up being kind of a one-trick pony. The director, Rob Savage, you might recognize from the found footage films Host and Dashcam of the last 3 years. I think Host came out in 2020, right in the midst of COVID, both of which I liked a lot. Savage foregoes the gimmickry of found footage and shoots this movie like any other big-budget Conjuring-esque horror movie. It's a bit like if Carrot Top performed stand-up without props. He'd do just okay. He's got the experience. It's just when you get rid of your crutch that you've used for a while, it's a little shaky. It's just all right. You get exactly what you'd expect about a movie about the Boogeyman. It's just a vehicle for jump scares and dread. I might be jaded, but this is, to me, a cookie-cutter, family-based horror film that's been done hundreds of times before and done a lot better. And this is some of my favorite movies are like the family-based haunting movies, like The Exorcist, Poltergeist, movies like that where it has the core of the family life and interaction and drama, and then they're set upon by an evil force. It's tried and true. I love it, but I love the movies that do it well so much better than this one. This one's just okay. I give it a 5 out of 10, and mostly I almost gave it a 4 out of 10, but it won me over with the ending. I was like, okay, you did a little thing there. That's okay. But yeah, it's just an average horror movie. What did you think, Jordyn?
We're gonna fight, Bryce. I'm giving it a 10. I loved it. Now, I have to give you some context.
Uh-oh.
Also, a huge Stephen King fan. I reread the Boogeyman, the short story, this week. And the movie is way different. And honestly, I read it and I was like, how are they gonna make a feature film out of this? But I do want to plug, I know this isn't the horror short story podcast, but I do want to plug reading that story because it's super short, only like 8 or 9 pages, and it's really, really disturbing and good. Movie was way different. I didn't watch any of the trailers. Wanted to go in kind of blind. Actually, you asked me to be on this podcast, and I was like, I didn't even know they were making a movie. But one thing to call out, like, it's PG-13. So I knew going into the theater it wasn't going to be like Michael Myers type slasher, gore, etc. But I really appreciated just the emotion, the underlying emotion and story. And I love a coming of age film, and just I have to give it that high of a score because I'm not always accustomed to seeing horror films with such incredible acting. The actors, the cast did such a good job here. I could feel the pain and Sophie in the way that she portrayed being a grieving teen that lost her mother, and I just, you could feel it. So I have to give it 10. We can talk about it more, but I really loved it.
A 10 out of 10. Wow, high praise.
High praise. Well,
Yeah, I mean the acting was good. I don't find any fault with the acting. I just think it didn't really delve into some of that psychological stuff as much as I would have liked, or
sure.
didn't really develop the premise of the monster that much. It's just it's very tropey. So it's
Totally
like,
get that.
kind of like I've seen it before. I knew what to expect, and it just didn't surprise me. You know, I guess that's what it comes down to.
And maybe it's because I've read the book or read the story before. So I was a little surprised of how they adapted it to be a film. So maybe I should have went in blind, but I hear what you're saying, because the story is a lot more like, is this guy crazy, or is there an actual boogeyman?
Yeah, we'll talk about the short story in the spoiler section, because I have some things to say about that too.
Nice.
And I think there's a little bit of missed opportunity there in terms of like character and tone that they just decided to forego for whatever reason. But yeah. Okay, so
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. And now I'm thinking, like, maybe I should give it a 9, because I think that we wanted the same thing.
Right. Okay, speaking of things that you want or don't want, if you're listening to commercials, you should know that you don't have to. If you go to our Patreon and subscribe to a certain level, you get early access to episodes without commercials. You can also support the show by going to our shop at horrormovietalk.com/shop. Buy logo tees. You can buy shirts like this, Team Spear. I don't know if you're up on the Team Spear versus Team Bat debate, Jordyn. What? So we'll talk about that in spoilers. Also, check out our resident artist, Dustin Goebel. He's a professional artist who fucks hard. He also takes commissions for artwork from HMT fans. Contact him at dgoebel00 on Instagram and make your artistic dreams come true. If you want to talk to us and leave us a voicemail, call 682-253-4468. Thanks again. Let's get into spoilers. Okay, so let's talk about the short story first, because I read it before going in. It is really short. You can find it in the night... What was it? Night Watch or Night...
I think it's
I forgot what it is. The night... Fuck. Night Shift.
Night Shift.
It's a collection of short stories from Stephen King. Yeah, and so I'll give you like the rundown of the short story itself. So the part where, sorry, I already forgot the name. So Lester Billings is a patient and comes into psychiatrist Will Harper's office, and he comes in desperate to tell his story of how he lost his 3 kids, and all from mysterious circumstances and totally not his fault. And I think the important thing about the story is he's a real piece of shit. That's kind of missing from the movie, is that I think they specifically say he's an alcoholic, but definitely like kind of a rough dude that does not really have a lot of nurturing within him, and he's very much like, the kids gotta toughen up. So when they start crying in their cribs and say they need mommy and daddy, you leave them, and then they die because of the boogeyman. And he basically goes through the story of the three, and the psychiatrist is not really able to help him, and then it caps off with like the psychiatrist gets killed by the boogeyman in the very end, or is the boogeyman. It was a little unclear, but the important thing is the tone was very dark. Lester was kind of a piece of shit, and it's also like you don't really know if he was the one that killed him or not. Like it gives you enough to question it until the end of the story. But yeah, it's very, very dark feeling, and feels like very much like a Stephen King story with a unlikable character. And the important thing is it's kind of a precursor to It. Like it was really setting the stage for having the unseen force be a representation of just fear in general. Like that's what I got out of it, is like, oh, he kind of filled this out and like perfected this with It later. What was your impression of the short story?
I loved it. I keep saying that. I love a lot of these things. But truly, I was disturbed reading it. And I think when I was in the theater watching the movie, I was like, Lester came in and I was like, oh shit. Like, because I was worried of how they were going to portray him, because one thing from that story, they would talk about how he'd pause and smile real big. And I was thinking of the movie Smile, that really unnerving, just like creepy ass smile. And they didn't do any of that with Lester in the movie. And I do think that there was something that could have been explored there. I still kind of wondered, like, okay, did this guy kill his kids, or is there really something supernatural going? But that could have been an even stronger inclination if they would have leaned into the character details that they did in the short story. But yeah, the ending, it's like you think you have it figured out. The guy is just crazy. And then it's like, oh, the psychiatrist is dead. So. Right.
Yeah, and I think in the movie, they ruined that, because it seemed like they had a little bit of an inkling to give you doubt of whether the story that Lester told was real or not. But this is like a beef I have with horror movies sometimes. Like the prologue ruins the first act, because it's like, okay, you already know that there's a monster and it's really an evil force, as opposed to like, who knows what it is? Like, are they imagining it or not? So like the prologue in this is just literally one of Lester's kids getting murdered, and you see like blood splatter on a picture. So and you see like this creepy goopy hand of the boogeyman on the crib. So at any point where they try to make it like, is it Lester? You're like, well, obviously not, unless he has like a swamp thing hand. So yeah, kind of a missed opportunity there. I wish they would have slow rolled it a little more. Do you
think that's the way they did it though, because it was originally going to be a streamer, like not go to the theater? I think about the start of horror movies, especially ones that go direct to streaming. They have to do something quick, because if I don't like it, I'm turning it off. Yeah. So I was just thinking about that as well.
Yeah, I mean it's a trade-off. Like, you either get the hook in early and get people excited about the prologue and keep them on, or you slow roll it and like really front load the drama. I mean, there's plenty of horror movies where the prologue is infinitely more interesting than the rest of the movie. Like, what was it? Ghost Ship comes to mind. Yeah. The opening. Have you ever seen Ghost Ship?
Bryce, I've given you beef about your rating of Ghost Ship, I think. Or maybe, no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Maybe it was. I can't
remember. I didn't like Ghost Boat. I mean, the opening was great. It was like that's the problem it has. Like, it has one of the best prologues of any horror movie, and then it just can't live up to it for the rest of the film. And there's other examples, but this is one of those where it's like, you kind of shot your shot a little too early with this one, and it just would have served the story more if they would have added more doubt and had like. I think they should, because in the movie that scene with Lester is like just barely a scene. Like, he's just in and out, and he commits suicide immediately, which like seems like if you're gonna base it on that short story, you could have stretched it out, had a couple of therapy sessions, added more doubt, and kind of built it around that therapy relationship, and then still had all the family stuff, but.
For sure.
They didn't go that route. It was very much like incidental. Basically, used Lester as the introduction of the concept, and then the rest of the movie developed it. But it's a really, really interesting concept, like in terms of like losing kids, especially like they mentioned SIDS, I think in the short story and in the movie, which is like it's not only just playing on the fears of kids of. What lurks in the shadows, but the fears of parents of like your baby can just die randomly for no reason, and they just have a name for that. It's like, yeah, sudden infant death syndrome. Like, not a lot of explanation. It's just your kid died. Sorry, bro.
It's terrifying. It's so terrifying.
Which is terrifying.
And
yeah,
like as a mother, I think that's why this story is so scary. And my kids are older, 8 and 12. So I don't have like the SIDS kind of anxiety anymore, but I used to go into the bedroom and just like feel their back, make sure they're still and it's terrifying. And it's something that like most parents have had that same fear.
Yeah. So the movie starts out with that scene with the baby in the crib, and you hear the monster speaking to it from the closet in the voice of its father, saying, "It's me, Daddy," which is super disturbing. And then it goes to Sawyer and kind of has a mirror scene with her, worried about the darkness in the closet. She kicks the light up moon next to my face right here.
Oh, nice.
Into the closet and doesn't see anything. So the family is overcoming or like working through the death of their mother while this happens, and a lot of like the fear and the stuff is blamed on that conveniently by Will, who's a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist, a psychologist, I'm not sure it's clear. I've never seen him prescribe anything, so maybe he's just a psychologist. So they're working through things. It's mostly like the main character is really Sadie, played by Sophie Thatcher. And she does a really good job. She goes back to school, gets picked on by some mean girls that are supposedly her friends. I don't know how that works. What, Jordyn, can you explain to me what is up with girls and their friends?
Yeah, no.
In high school?
In high school and in middle school, like, girls are mean. Girls are very mean. And I think, I don't know where it comes from, honestly. Maybe not having parents that build them up and give them confidence so they don't have to tear down the confidence of others. I don't know. But that scene, or several scenes actually, where her quote unquote friends were just fucking brutal, man. Like,
right.
She's wearing one of her mother's dresses, and they notice, and they're like, why do you think that's a good idea? Like, you don't want to scare people. And it's just like, okay, these people are also kids, but I think the blonde's name was like Natalie or something. I don't know, but I just wanted to smack her so bad. It was so hard to watch as a parent that has two girls, and I'm like, whew. I mean, I made a 12-year-old cry in volleyball season this year, so we've definitely had.
Oh yeah, you got to tell that story.
We're just dealing with a bully, man, and honestly, I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want this to get back to the parents, but it did not go well, and it was funny because we were at a volleyball game, and okay, wait, let me back up. I went to a practice to pick up my kid early, and I'm like watching through the window, and I just see this little shit just being brutal. Just, they're at practice, and anytime my kid would mess up, she'd run over and scream in her face, just like, what the fuck? And so I went in, talked to coach, said you need to do something, and the next game, nothing was really done. And the next game, this kid had the nerve to come up to me and bring me something. And I was like, hey, so-and-so, are your parents here? And she immediately was deer in the headlights. Just like, yeah. And I was like, can you point them out to me? And you know me, Bryce, I'm obnoxious and like super smiley. And there was not a hint of conflict in my voice, in my tone. And she pointed them out, and I looked at them, and I looked back to her, and she's sobbing. And I'm like, okay, you know what you did. So yeah, it turned into a whole thing. Had to talk to mom. It was very clear to me that mom is part of the problem. Like, yeah, just very defensive, very deflective. Could not get on the same page. And I told her, I was like, look, I'm sorry I made your kid cry.
So you only made her cry just from asking about where her parents were. You didn't even like put a finger in her chest and be like, listen, you little shit. Nothing. Nothing. And you know me, like, I am not a person who thrives on conflict. Like, I don't know. It was rough. But you know what? That next practice, that same kid was teaching my kid how to make her serve better. And she was warming up with her in the next game. And just, sometimes they just need a little nudge and to remember that mom does not fuck around. But yeah, girls are brutal. Girls are brutal. It's so weird, like comparing teenage boys. Teenage boys can be pretty brutal too, but it's usually like physically and just like kind of brutal teasing. Like you'll like if you're with your friends, they'll be like pretty brutal with calling you out and like making fun of you, but it's much more like surface level, I think. I think you don't get much further than just like appearances or like choices or just being, well, I can't talk it. I grew up in the, the 90s, and so the things that we said to each other as boys can't say anymore. But, a lot of accusations about lifestyle choices. And as far as girls, like, they cut to the core.
They do. They
like,
make you cry.
Yeah, and I've witnessed it from afar, and that's the one thing that I've had from having a daughter is I'm terrified of when she turns 13, because I just remember like 13-year-old girls to 25, I guess, are just the meanest, most brutal, insane creatures that I've experienced in my life.
Hey, just a lot of feelings. You just gotta lean into it. That's it. Just hear them out and take a lesson from what was Dad's name? Will Harper?
Yeah, Will. Yeah.
Listen to your kids.
Right.
Otherwise, the boogeyman's gonna come get them.
Right. So the thing that Lester sets up most importantly is this quote of, it's the thing that comes for your kids when you're not paying attention. So that's kind of the premise of the movie of like, yeah. And kind of the theme is that Will is just not addressing the kids' needs throughout this movie. Like when Sadie comes to him kind of asking him about the day that their mother died, or her feelings about it, he's like, yeah, you should probably talk to your therapist about this stuff. Like, just very much like putting it off, which is crazy because, you know, if you're a psychologist, you should probably have the tools to handle this, but,
It's like, sir,
you know,
you're
there's
a
that
clinician.
cliche of like, yeah,
Help your child.
there's that cliche of like, yeah, the people whose profession it is, like the handyman's house is always the worst, in worst disrepair, and kind of same thing with psychiatrists. Sometimes they're the most disturbed people. So that's going on. Sadie is like really struggling. She's like looking up seance YouTube videos and really missing her mom. And, you know, looking for like, you know, feeling the presence of a lost loved one. I know I've had that desire. Like, that's what's so frustrating. Like, I grew up pretty religious, and there's all these stories of people appearing after death and like coming back to their loved ones. And I just lost my dad. He never came back. He's just gone. And to a certain extent of like, even if, I mean, knowing my dad, I don't take it as proof of anything one way or the other, because I'm pretty sure that my dad just wouldn't care enough to come back anyways. He'd be like, it's kind of a hassle. They're fine. They like stuff like when we went like a year afterwards, and like my mom cleaned up his gravestone and like left flowers, and I'm like, Dad wouldn't give a shit about any of this. Like, he doesn't care about what his gravestone looks like. If he still exists in some sphere outside of here, like, he doesn't give two shits about his gravestone. He's not super sentimental.
It's more about us, right?
But yeah, I mean, have you
like, it's
say
more
again?
it's more about the family to have that gravestone and like tribute and honor,
right?
You know, it's definitely more about us in my mind anyway. Speaking, I told you about Granny Linda. Like, she does not want to be put in the ground. She does not want to be cremated. She's like, can you just stuff me and put me in a corner?
Shoot her out of a cannon?
No, she
Okay.
she wants to be taxidermied.
Okay, that's good. That's
She's
pretty
gonna
good.
kill me if she listens to this.
Have you ever had that? Have you lost a loved one? Have you ever felt the presence of someone or had any weird experiences around that?
I haven't too many times. I lost my grandpa Butch, my Papa Butch. I used to call him Papa Bitch when I was little and couldn't say his name. And actually he called me the week before he passed, and I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I was at practice and I ignored it and didn't answer. And so later on that week, like, we had some issues with the lights. Like, I would remember I turned off the bathroom light or the bedroom light, and then I go back and it was on, and I was like, what the fuck? Is someone messing with me? And my mom swears it's Papa Butch. He's just mad you didn't answer the phone. So more of those light type things, but this is probably me just leaving the light on. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I take the staunch, stance of like the X-Files. I want to believe, like I want something like that to happen to me and have kind of that reassurance or even just that doubt. But I just, no matter how much I want to see a ghost or how much I want to like feel the presence of my grandparents or my dad, like, it's just not happening for me. Maybe I'm just too cynical.
Dude, yeah, I don't think it's family, but I definitely I'm in the club that wants to believe for sure. And I lived in a historic apartment when I lived in Jefferson City, Missouri, and it was like less than a half mile from the old state pen, which is now like a ghost tour. There were so many deaths there, and it was right along the Missouri River. And actually my landlord came to me one night and told me, like, I need you to know that there is a ghost in your apartment and she's playing with Ellie. And Ellie's my oldest daughter, and Ellie didn't talk until she was 2.5. She had some hearing issues. We got them all cleared up, but she would go into her bedroom and just talk. Like, it sounded like she was having a conversation. And I was like, maybe it's just, the isolation and like feeling like she can say things without people around. But that was a weird experience. That's my closest like paranormal experience. And who knows if it was real or just if the landlord had a friend that he wanted to move in or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, even that age, like there's lots of stories of that too, just like kids being creepy as fuck. Like, oh, I'm talking to the person in the corner, Daddy, and you're like, shit. Yeah, I'm still waiting on it. Rest assured, if I die, like, I'm gonna haunt the fuck out of everyone I know. Just gonna be like pushing shit off of the counter, turning on lights, opening doors.
You're gonna be like a cat in the afterlife, just
yeah. Maybe that's the
off.
secret. Everyone turns into a cat in the afterlife.
There it is. We've cracked the code.
So there's a couple like kind of set, kind of unique scenes. So Sadie and Sawyer, after like Sawyer has been like accosted by the boogeyman a couple times and no one believes her, they go to the therapist and they're talking about it and they just chalk it up to being afraid of the dark. And so there's the scene with the flashing red light that turns off and on to get her acclimated to the dark, and does the actual absolute opposite of what they want because the boogeyman comes and attacks her. Lots of little moments like that throughout. I mean, again, I said it's a one-trick pony, and that's kind of everything that the movie has, is like you put them in a dark corner and wait for the boogeyman to kind of show up, to the point where I can't even really tell whether it's night or day a lot of the time. Like sometimes they go down into the basement and it seems like the light is still shining through the windows, and you're like, this house just needs to be so dark for this movie to work that they can't ever have it feel like daytime ever. And like kind of the trope of, they establish that to be safe from the boogeyman, you got to stay in the light. It's afraid of the light, so stay in the light. And even with that knowledge, no one ever turns on any lights, because why would you?
So frustrating.
I mean, that's very tropey, but I mean, it's what you got to do for it to work. Eventually Sadie does a little investigating around Lester Billings and finds his widow in their old broken down house. And Mrs. Billings gives like the exposition dump of the movie, which is like, the boogeyman latches on. I mean, she names it the boogeyman, and also it says that it latches on to the hurt and vulnerable and doesn't let go, and it needs the dark to stay hidden. And then gives like the probably my favorite unintentionally funny lines of the movie, which is, fire is the first thing men use to see at night. I'm like, yeah.
No
Thanks for establishing that in the movie. Like, we would have never known that fire gives light at night. Like, what a weird line.
I think she was trying to establish.
And the house is like.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think she was trying to establish, like, as long as there was light, there was darkness, and this thing could be that old, like, from the beginning. Because I think the next line was something about, like, the age of this monster.
Right.
Or that's what I interpreted it as. But yeah, hearing it, it was like not very hard hitting, you know?
You know, nothing quite quenches your thirst like water. You know, water's really good at quenching thirst. Thank you. Thanks for the tip. Since the beginning of time, people have used water to drink. Uh-huh. So this house is very much like another weird thing is the Billings house shows this weird like fungal growth is what I call it around the house, like the dark vines, like the veins and stuff. And it doesn't really establish anything or explain it other than like, yeah, that seems cool and spooky. Let's use that. You've seen that in kind of like the Last of Us and some other movies use like just anonymous dark stains throughout a house to communicate something's dark here. Something's not right.
I interpreted that as like, you know, we saw the like swampy hand of the boogeyman, and like the way I imagine a boogeyman is like this gross, like a booger, you know, like just this nasty, like swampy kind of phlegmy looking thing. And so in my mind, like if it's there's that extra moisture, you're going to have a mold issue.
That's true. This goes back to like the latent fear that The Ring also played on, which is the scariest thing to adults is water damage.
It's
like
so
that's the most frightening thing in this movie for me is like, ooh, water damage and black mold. Like it's really going to hurt the resale value. I'm going to have to call out a contractor and pay him thousands of dollars to spray watered down bleach on my walls for a treatment, you know?
It's just terrible. And also not good for the allergies. It's just
right.
not a good thing.
Right. It's a toss up. What is more threatening to children, black mold or the boogeyman? You know, who can say? So Sadie kind of writes off Lester's widow, and they move on. The movie just kind of follows the Conjuring, which is like it just ramps up the more and more opportunities for jump scares. I like, you know, since it's a Stephen King adaptation, there's a couple things that are kind of interesting. Since this was written before it, like I really think it's like a kind of a precursor, and he kind of perfects that concept of just using the unseen and the latent fear as the monster itself. There's the scene where Sadie is going down to the basement, which is just straight out of it. I mean, not really, but I mean, it just reminded me of like that's a really important scene in explaining what it is. And then the other one is when the boogeyman finally like grabs Sadie and latches onto her. It shows him like sucking something out of her face, which is kind of a trope, but also reminded me of Steam from the Dr. Sleep movie. And like you could say that, you know, the boogeyman is using, you know, feeding on the shine. Like that's a whole thing in the Stephen King universe is the steam or the shine, the ability and like feeding on the life force of people. And so you could say it's kind of a crossover concept.
I didn't even.
Did you catch that?
I love Stephen King, and God, I loved Doctor Sleep, the book and the movie. I didn't even think about that. That's a good call out. Wow.
Yeah. Doctor Sleep is probably. I mean, it's such a disappointment that it didn't do better than it did. Like, that was one of the best horror movies in the last 5 years, and just no one saw it at all.
I've kind of forgotten about it. Like, I have seen it, and I love it. I'm going to put that in my top 5. Can we? put Doctor Sleep in the top 5. It's so good. Kick out Midsummer. You've already got Ari Aster in Sorry,
there.
Florence Pugh. Doctor Sleep is taken over.
Yeah, Doctor Sleep was so good. We have a whole episode on that as well. But man, like between the book and the movie, like I just really, who was it that did the? Oh, it was Mike Flanagan that did Doctor Sleep. That's right.
I think that's why.
And just the fact that he like seamlessly integrated the inconsistencies between the book Shining and the movie Shining just perfectly, because the Doctor Sleep book was a sequel to the Shining book, and the Doctor Sleep movie had to be a sequel to the Shining movie, which had a completely different ending. But yeah, I mean, in the Stephen King universe, like the shine or the steam is like a really important part. So I like that they kind of integrated a little bit of a concept from that.
Totally.
What other scenes stood out for you, Jordyn? Was there anything that you particularly liked or worked for you?
I think the moment that Sophie, I hate when they use alliteration for the kids' names, because then Sadie, the oldest.
Sadie.
And the actress.
No, she's played by Sophie Thatcher.
God, it's too much. But when Sadie kind of figures out that it's real and she finally believes her little sister, I think she's spoiler, she's dreaming. But she sees the little sister in the dream, and she's kind of like pestering her and following her around, and she goes to the room and is like, I need my space, and she slams the door, and then the door just comes down on her. Like it's the boogeyman, like breaking down the door. And I don't know if she was dreaming or if the boogeyman can influence dreams or like what that was all about. But then, if I remember correctly, that's when she was finally like, okay, I believe you.
Yeah.
I loved the way that scene was shot. That was probably my biggest jump scare in the whole movie. And it was just like, oh shit, this thing's serious. And it's funny because she woke up and it's like, oh, thank God it was a dream. But it scared her. It scared her big time. And that's when she kind of was like, okay, yes.
Yeah, there's a couple good fake outs in the movie. One was like when she saw blood running underneath a door and it turned out to be paint. And then the other one was the dream where the boogeyman like starts just going into her throat. It's always, and then she wakes up.
Also,
that's pretty disturbing. I gotta say, like, one of my beefs with the movie too is like the first appearance of the boogeyman with Sawyer was, it literally just crushes through the door like a SWAT team and then scurries underneath her bed. And I'm like, what 10-year-old would not be screaming bloody murder and terror and running out of the room when that happened? Like, it just didn't make any sense for me.
So
I'm like,
I definitely thought that too, that she was super calm. And the more I thought about it, like, they had established that little sister Sawyer had this fear of the boogeyman, and it looked, she had all the lights and stuff, and it looked like her family was accustomed to her being scared. So maybe she's kind of desensitized to her mind playing games, and maybe she doesn't trust herself whether it was real or not. I don't know. But that's why I was like, let it pass.
Yeah, I mean, it's you gotta like have the suspension of disbelief in it, but I mean, it was a strong choice. The door slams open, like not like creaking open. And this is pretty early on in the movie too, and you know, just definitely like loud scurrying underneath the bed. It's like, all right, well, I guess you're gonna, you know, not slow roll this at all. Like it's gonna be definitely a monster under the bed. So there's a couple moments like that, and then like sometimes it kind of breaks its own rules. Like eventually, you know, because it says like it's afraid of the light, just stay in the light and you'll be fine. And Sawyer is playing PlayStation on the couch with like a really bright, you know, giant TV, and apparently that didn't save her because the boogeyman jumps out at her like on the couch, even though she's in the light. So whatever. And the other inconsistency that I saw was, okay, so they set up the Billings, the Billings widow as like using Sadie as bait and setting up like these shotgun shell traps for the boogeyman. Doesn't work at all. Like it's obvious that the boogeyman can't be killed with a gun. And then 2 scenes later, Sadie's like, I saw it bleed. Maybe we can hurt it. And she takes a hockey stick. And I'm like, you know, I'm not an expert, but in general, if a gun doesn't work, a hockey stick probably is not going to.
No.
I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, that was tough. It's like, why not get out of the house? I don't know. I guess it could leave the house, but they're all just there. Like that's the part that drives me crazy about these. Like, just go away. But I guess the boogeyman can follow wherever. I mean, it followed Lester to their house. Yeah. But yeah, super frustrating. Happy about the fire, but I also
or you know, you could just turn on a light. Just turn on the lights.
Just turn on the damn lights. I was also a little...
Get a bunch of flashlights.
I was also a little confused by, like... Okay, so she smokes her mom's weed with all her gal friends. And then suddenly she's, like, coughing up little sister's tooth. And cool concept, but also like very supernatural. Like how? So
right.
Those are things that are hard to swallow.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those where it's like, don't think about it. It's scary. You know, don't think about it too hard. The ending was pretty good. Like I'll give it to it. Like the ending was good. They end up burning the boogeyman to death. And then just like capping it off in the end, and just I realized like, oh, okay. I connected the dots with it of the metaphor of the movie, which is like Will is not able to confront the trauma of his wife dying, and not able to address the fears and the trauma in his daughters, and it's just making things worse. And it's that fear and trauma is a stand-in for like the physical danger and fear of the boogeyman, where it's like, yeah, it's the fear of the unknown, of the unseen and the unaddressed. And in the end, we see Will communicating with his daughters and like actually talking about his wife and processing that trauma. And you realize like, oh, okay, so this is, it kind of comes full circle, and you're like, yeah, you got to bring these things into the light to conquer them. And I really like that. Like that got a full extra point from me. I was like, okay, I see you Rob Savage. I see what you're doing here. That's pretty good. I wish they would have used that more throughout the film. They did kind of the bare minimum and used it as like kind of the setup, and I wish they would have explored that a little more personally.
For sure. Yeah. Any film that's like encouraging therapy and talking about your trauma and feelings, I'm like, yes, 10 out of 10.
Yeah. It's strange. Like, now that I think of it, like, this is the second movie. Is it of this year? Did Smile come out this year? When did Smile come out? 2022. Okay, so it came out last year. So probably within the last year. This is the second movie that was based around psychiatry or psychologists. I like Smile a lot better. Did you like Smile?
I did like Smile. And honestly, I was kind of wondering, like, was Smile kind of inspired by this short story, Boogeyman short story? Because, like, when I was reading that and they talked about Lester, like, would stop and smile real big. And it's like, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of Smile when I was reading the short story so much. And so I kind of wonder. They're very similar.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading the short story and didn't interpret the smile as, like, nefarious necessarily, but more of, like, an indicator of an internal thought that he didn't want to betray kind of thing. Where it was, again, like, Lester was kind of a piece of shit in the short and just was not very feeling or caring about his kids, apparently. And so a little bit of that was like smiling about, like, his kids being kind of terrified, which is like, okay, it's not a good sign. Yeah, Smile, I think was based off of a short film that was, like, basically the same. And yeah, I mean, it's a very, very similar setting. Was the Smile short film was based entirely in the psychiatrist office. So yeah, it might have been like a ripoff.
No, I'm not saying that, but I don't know. I haven't seen the short of the Smile, but just reading that story, not even seeing the trailer for Boogeyman or any of the adaptations that have been made, I was thinking of the Smile. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
Any other scenes that jumped out at you, or any other observations that you found watching it? I mean, you gave it a real high score. What was it that really worked for you? I mean, I guess about Sadie, what worked about you with, like, Sadie's perspective and story?
I think just the fact that she's a teen and going through it, and that was something that really resonated with me, especially as a mom of a kid who has experienced a ton of bullying in this last year, and seeing the hurt that others can cause. So it just really resonated. Like, I felt for her. And also, I'm a huge fan of Yellow Jackets. Have you watched Yellow Jackets?
I haven't.
Oh God, it's so good, Bryce.
I don't even know what it's about.
Well,
I kind of conflate it with Yellow Jackets, and then there's wasn't there another bee-related thing on Amazon? I can't remember what it was.
I don't know if it was bee-related, but there was something about girls on an island. I forgot what it was.
Swarm. That's what it was.
Oh, no.
I'm thinking of a Swarm.
Yeah, anyway, my point about Yellow Jackets is it's good to see I think she's a breakout actress, and she's so good. And I feel like so many times I watch a scary movie and, what's her name? Ortega. Like, I just watched Scream, the most recent Scream, and I was like, man, this gal's getting a lot of, like, praise, and I just don't see it. I do not see this as a good acting. And so to see Sophie as a kid struggling, like I could feel that from her. I cried in the movie, like when she was being bullied by her friends more than once. It just, I was so happy when she slapped that bitch in the office. That was the most, like, that was the best. It was so hard not to just celebrate. But overall, I think I appreciate it the most because they took a short story that has, like you said, been done a million times, and they just made it a little more nuanced. Like, grief is something we all deal with at some point in our lives. And to see, like, a monster just kind of capitalizing off of that, or like feeding on it, and then seeing this family come together, start communicating, going to therapy, and, you know, beating the monster. It was just really gratifying for me. Like, I felt good leaving that movie. We didn't talk about the very last thing, though. Similar to the short story, where they're leaving the therapist's office, and then suddenly Sadie hears the therapist call her back in, and she goes in, the closet is cracked, and then the therapist comes in from another corner. So it was a nice little callback.
I thought they were gonna do the short story ending, which was probably the coolest part of the short story, which is like the boogeyman is there. Yeah, the boogeyman calls Lester back in the voice of the therapist, and then he sees the boogeyman like holding, I think it says, the mask of the therapist.
It's like the suit. Wasn't it like skin suit or something? Or
right.
It was bizarre, and my mind's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I was watching the movie, and I'm like, the tone is just not set up to be able to do that. Like, it's very much going to be a hopeful ending. And so when it started to do that, I was like, oh, like this could be pretty interesting. And they kind of just
missed opportunity.
Just suggest that, like, oh, the boogeyman's still there, but they don't, like, it's not a, you know, terrifying or like dreadful ending where the psychologist is actually murdered by the boogeyman. But it is definitely a callback to the short story.
Oh, for sure. And as the kind of person I am, like, I liked the ending. I'm glad it was left on a hopeful note. And Bryce, I think you'll know what I mean there. Like, I'm just a very, like, oh yes, everyone's good. But as a horror fan, like, definitely a missed opportunity. They could have left me feeling a little more emotionally impacted leaving that theater if they would have, you know, had the therapist skin suit on the floor. So
right.
But overall, I just thought it was great. I really did. I'm also, like, looking forward to watching it with my kid. You know, and so that's one reason I was kind of appreciative it was PG-13, because I think it's something that a lot of kids will identify with, but may not necessarily have parents that are okay with them watching a rated R film. Can't relate. What's that? So that's another part that just kind of makes me happy that there is accessibility here for younger generations to be able to watch this and probably identify with it pretty hard.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that is a really good observation to make, that, like, I didn't even think about the rating. It's really good for a PG-13 horror movie. Like, there's few that, like, I'd recommend or that aren't, like, kind of ruined by the rating. But this it uses the full extent of that PG-13 rating and would definitely be a good entry for young horror viewers. It's so weird, like, talking to some of our fans, like, we have people that were introduced to The Exorcist at age 6. I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with these parents? Like, how can you do that to your kids? Like, my son is like terrified of cartoons that have heightened emotion, in it for a brief moment. I'm like, showing The Exorcist to my kid that's like 8 right now would be like he would go catatonic for the rest of his life, I feel. And then some people are just like, oh yeah, I saw Faces of Death when I was 2 and I really liked it, so I started getting into horror movies. It's like, woof. So yeah, these PG-13 movies where it's like, these are a little safer, a little less traumatic, a little less hard. This one, like Drag Me to Hell, was pretty great too. I think we had a list of like PG-13 horror movies that were really good, but it's pretty sparse on the good ones. So I'd recommend this.
I had low hopes going into it, honestly. Seeing the rating, knowing it was an adaptation from one of my favorite authors, knowing the short story, not knowing how they were going to make a full film out of it, like I thought it was going to bomb. But I was pleasantly surprised. So yeah, it was worth the money, definitely.
Yeah. So who final recommendations? Who do you think would like this?
I think that
among horror fans, like who would you say, like, if you like this, you'd like The Boogeyman?
I kind of think Carrie. Fans of Carrie would probably like this. Having that coming of age piece and not having a parent who's supportive or just feeling a little bit like an outsider. I think folks that really like Carrie are probably really going to like this, because there's a lot of those same identifiers. Like, you feel for that main character. You feel for Sadie, Sophie Thatcher's character, the same way that you kind of feel for Carrie.
Yeah, I'd say like this is definitely along the lines of like the Conjuring movies, like very good, like kind of entry level general audience movies. So like we said before, something good that you could watch with your kids. Yeah, those types like that like the family based horror. If you've seen everything, it'll be kind of a repeat of a lot of things that you've seen, but it's not a terrible movie. It's a 5 out of 10 for me is not a bad movie. It's just, it gives you what you expect and nothing more, nothing less, it's not necessarily an indictment.
I also think I said this earlier, it kind of reminded me of the Babadook a little bit, because just like seeing the parents struggle with their kids and not really believing them and having this monster, literal boogeyman. I was also feeling like, especially the drawing was very similar to me. Like, I was getting Babadook vibes a couple of times throughout the movie. So I think if you like that one too, this is another one you might check out.
Right. Yeah, it is pretty similar to the Babadook. Less annoying kids.
Yes.
Like, you don't want to strangle the kids as much as you do in the Babadook, but in terms of like trauma and overcoming death, like, yeah, it's pretty similar themes.
I was impressed with the younger one, Sawyer. I thought she did a good job too with her acting. Like, there was one scene where it was the one you described, where she's like under the covers and then Sophie comes in and sits on the bed and is talking to her, and it was like, hey, are you okay, or whatever, and then she says, yeah, just trying not to get killed. Like, I liked her personality a lot. It was not like a typical little kid. She reminded me of my youngest, actually.
Yeah, I think other than Lester, the guy that played Lester Billings, he was, like, I was looking at the IMDb for these people. I don't recognize anyone other than Lester Billings was the polka dot man in Suicide Squad, and he is kind of recognized. He's got a very distinct face, and so you've seen him before, but he was most recently, starring in Suicide Squad, and then the girl that played Sawyer, Vivian Lyra Blair, I was like, she looks familiar for being so young, and I realized like, oh, she played the young Princess Leia in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus. That's where she was from. I think she did a lot better in this one. It was better material actually in this movie than the Obi-Wan series, but that's a separate thing. And I guess she was also in Bird Box playing Girl.
Oh yeah,
so,
that's where I recognize
not
her
a lot
from.
of credits, but she did really well.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Okay, well,
you're good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna hype up this movie some more, but yeah, I've said I don't have anything else original to say, but I loved the film.
All right. Well, good. No, it's good that you're excited by it. Like I will say, like I saw it in ideal conditions. I wasn't tired. I wasn't falling asleep. I saw it in the middle of the day yesterday, and I was still like, okay, that's fine. So do with that information what you will. Thanks everyone for listening. This episode is produced by me and edited by Fart Simpson. Thanks, Fart, for helping us out. Thanks to all of our patrons. I should probably mention our patrons. Hold on. Do we have any new ones? We'll just thank some recent patrons here. Beatrice and Amanda M. and Darren P. Thanks for joining us on our journey. If you like the show, please share it with a friend. That really helps us out. If you're going to buy anything on Amazon, you can click through on our website, horrormovietalk.com, and give us a little taste of whatever you spend on Amazon. Thank you so much, Jordyn, for joining us. We'll have you back again sometime. Hope it wasn't too traumatic for you to come on the show.
This was great. Thank you for having me. Seriously, I really appreciate it. This is my first podcast, so hopefully the fans don't say I have a shitty voice and not to have me back. So.
They'll definitely say that. No, listen. Keep listening. I'm sure. Yeah, if you want to give some feedback, call 682-253-4468 and tell Jordyn how shitty of a voice she has, and we might play your messages on a later episode and traumatize Jordyn at a later date. Thanks again so much. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Good day, sir. Good day, sir. You lose. You get nothing. Is that me? Yes, it is.
I just took a stroll through the scraggly woods.
He had no face.
Horror!
Wow, that didn't sound good.